Welcome everyone, I'm Mr. R, and this is the Rondinelli Project with yet another video. Today's question to ponder: when it comes to crappie fishing, which is better, the minnow or the jig? And what should you use? And what is the best way to rig them? Look, I love to fish for crappies, and for the most part they are fairly predictable. But there are days where they can be extremely finicky and leave many anglers scratching their heads wondering what to use, the minnow or the jig. There are days where crappies won't hit a jig and prefer live bait. And of course, the opposite is also true. I've seen days where a jig will outperform natural bait in a ratio of 20 to 1. It's a good idea to hit the water, though, with both on board. After all, it's the crappie in the driver's seat. If you are new to crappie angling, I hope you find this video helpful. So, let's get to it. Early in the year, when the water's cold, the fish aren't as active, and sometimes live bait's better than a jig. When it comes to live bait, I really prefer small fatheads. I like them about an inch and a half long. I generally hook them through the eyes because I'm wind drifting, and there's different ways to rig your minis, and we'll get into that a little later in the video. But when you're wind drifting, you want to hook them through the eyes because you're covering lots of water, and you want the minnow to look like it's swimming. Early on, the females are not on the shore and are out in deeper water, and that's usually what you're after, is the bigger females, like the one you see here. This is a white crappie, and it's going to end up being a spawning female. Obviously, these minnows are not alive, but I'm using them for demonstration purposes only. In the previous clip, I was wind drifting, and I hook my minnows through the eyes, like you see here. I do that because I want to imitate a minnow swimming through the water. I also put my split shot 8 to 10 inches above the minnow that keeps it down. You want to be 2 or 3 feet off the bottom. Early in the year, the crappies tend to be a little deeper, and they tend to feed upward. Their eyes are fixated on the top of their head. So that's the technique. When you're anchored and you're fishing for crappies, you rig your mini completely differently because you're not moving. So this is the type of hook that I use. It's a true turn, not necessarily that brand or make, but it's an offset hook. And this is where you attach the split shot, because when you're anchored, you want to hook your minnow through the back, and the minnow will swim around down there because you're not moving around, so you want the minnow to move around. So you have to anchor it through the back, right underneath the dorsal fin and towards the back of the dorsal fin. The split shot keeps the minnow from swimming upward, which is what you don't want. You want to keep that minnow in place, preferably above the crappies, and this keeps your minnow down. This is your hook set when you are anchored through the back of a minnow. Now this is how you fish with tube bait jigs. And they come in an assortment of different colors. They come in blue and black and green and chartreuse and red and chartreuse. Buy them in packs of 10 like this. It really depends. I find that for me, the best color is black and chartreuse, although a lot of different colors can be used depending on how finicky the fish are. But the proper way to rig one of these, I use a jig hook. This is a 1/32 ounce jig hook, and there's a reason for 1/32 ounce. It has a nice float when it's in the water. The proper way to rig this up is to insert the jig in the back. These are hollow, and you want to make sure that the eyelet comes out through the side. just like this. And once this is done, you're going to tie this directly to your line. Use a 4-pound test line, ultra low visibility green. If you have murky or stained water, the line tends to disappear in the water, which is good. Makes this very believable. It's got some nice action on it when it moves in the water, and crappies absolutely love this. They go crazy over this. You can also tip these with a mini when you're drifting, and at that point you do want to put a split shot about 10 or 12 inches above the jig. The size of the split shot depends on the wind conditions, and the more the wind, the more weight you need to get it down, and drift with that. And that's also really good success. And you cover lots of water till you find them. Once you find them, you can mark them, set up, and hopefully, fill the live well with fish. This is the reel I use. It's a Shakespeare ultralight reel. It's attached to a graphite rod, which is very sensitive. You don't want a big reel. This one is spooled with low visibility green line, which makes it difficult for the crappie to see. But nice smooth feel on this reel. It's perfect for crappie fishing.
Often I get asked, what do you use for bait? Well, that kind of depends. Some days they like minis, other days they don't. Early in the year, I use tube baits. This is a soft plastic. The one I'm using is 1.5 inch tube bait. It's hollow. You put a jig head inside. Usually I use 1/16 to 1/32 ounce. You simply use a fisherman's knot, wrap it around 8-10 times, pull it back through on itself, pull it tight, and trim off the excess line. And there you have it. You can fish it plain or tip it with a maggot. It's really up to the user. Speaking of line, what pound test should you use? I use 4-pound test, low visibility green, and the reason I do that is Lake Wilhelm is a murky lake. It's not crystal clear. And low visibility green disappears in the water, which you just get a lot more bites that way. I've met many fishermen that spend all day in the water and they don't catch a lot of crappies, and a lot of it is because the crappie can see your presentation doesn't look natural. Some days they'll hit anything. Everybody's an expert during the spawn, but there are times when they're just not biting, and you have to use a little finesse, and line sometimes is the key. So go light, be careful around the brush, and you should have success. Slow presentation, don't go too fast, keep it up off the bottom. The eyes are fixated on the top of their head and they're upward feeders. Found him. It took a while. All in all, it was a pretty good day. Hey, remember, when it comes to fishing, every lake is different. Every day is different, and there is no magic formula. The fish will tell you what they want if you pay attention. Now, through the years, here's what I've learned about jigs versus minnows. None of the following tips are intended to be an exhaustive list. Use minnows early in the season with colder water. Use minnows when drifting, hooking them through the eyes. With kids, if you're using minnows, I really recommend that because the fish will hold the bite much longer. Use minnows under a bobber. Use minnows while anchored. Make sure you hook them under the dorsal fin, high in the back like I showed you in the video, because that keeps the fish alive. Use minnows that are smaller. It has been my experience that smaller is better when it comes to crappies. 1 to 1.5 inch fatheads or emerald shiners, depending on what you can find in your area. Use minnows after 6 p.m. until it gets dark. Use jigs once the spawn starts. Use jigs to cast and retrieve with or without a bobber. Use jigs tipped with a maggot. That definitely works. Use jigs when minnows aren't working, obviously, and use jigs by experimenting with colors. You'll figure out what colors work best on your body of water. I highly recommend that. Finally, starting the day, using one rod with a minnow, one rod with a jig, until the crappies tell you what they prefer that day. When it comes to the minnow or the jig question, there is no right or wrong answer. But it has been my experience that the jig, for me, outperforms the minnow. I hope this has been helpful. Hit that like button. And subscribe if you like. I'm Mr. R, and this is the Rondinelli Project with tips from the tackle box. Until next time, we gone.